Hey, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule, although it may not be as busy as it once was, but we're headed back to that phase of life here. But thanks for joining us today for this session. I wanted to first kind of introduce who you're going to be hearing from today. There's a few people who have agreed to join me here. So I'm going to be covering the aspect of video within live streaming. Adam Geesaman, who is no relation, although probably some relation, is the AV director at Victory Church. He was previously a partner at Dutchman Sound and an audio tech at Sight and Sound Theaters. He's either blocked me on Facebook or deleted his account, one of the two, because I couldn't Facebook stalk him to get more of his bio. But if I'm not mistaken, he has 2 kids with his wife, Emily. Then we've got Tim Moser, who's going to be talking about lighting. Tim has a BFA in lighting design from IUP. He's been the production designer at LCBC Church for the last 17 years, which involves both lighting and set design. And Tim lives in Mannheim with his wife, Katie, and their 3 sons, and I believe 3 dogs as well. Then we've got Kevin Wishard, who's going to be talking about streaming tech, so the technology side of streaming, encoders, that kind of fun stuff. Kevin is the broadcast coordinator at LCBC Church. He and his wife, Joanna, just introduced their 2nd child to the world in the past couple of weeks here, so welcome to Kevin. Adam Han is going to be discussing platforms and sort of delivery of our live streams and content. Adam lives in Mount Joy with his wife, Amanda, and son, Lincoln. He loves time with his family, learning new technologies and anything related to transformers. He's been on staff at LCBC Church for over 14 years, and he works with the digital team there as the digital director at LCBC Church. And I've worked with the guys from LCBC Church for many years as the video production director there. But now I serve as the chair of the Communication and Media Arts Department at Lancaster Bible College, and also direct the live production program there. I would be amiss to not recognize Dr. Michael Freeman, who I believe is on here with us somewhere in the list. This is a little bit of his brainchild. I had been thinking about, there's this need to talk about this, especially in light of what's happened with COVID-19 over the past few months. And then Dr. Freeman said something to me in a meeting. I was like, yeah, let me reach out to some people that I've worked with at Victory Church and LCBC Church and see what they think about this. And the response was immediate from all of these guys. They were having questions coming from other churches and people having to basically spin up live streaming very, very quickly. And I was experiencing the same thing, where my students in the live production program were suddenly thrust into the position of expert at their churches in live streaming. Okay, now what do we do? And so that's kind of where this all came from. Both the students as experts and all of you basically becoming experts overnight in this field. So the people on the panel here have had the luxury of some time to think about this and test things and figure it out. Many of you did not have that luxury and basically were forced to do this overnight. And so here we are kind of on the, hopefully the down slope of and inviting people back into our physical locations over the next few weeks. And so the question now is, what do we do? What now? Because we've invested time, we've invested money into making this happen very quickly. So do we continue it? Do we try to make it better? If so, why? What is our goal? And so that's the kind of stuff that we want to help you with today. We will talk about some technology. We'll probably talk about some specific models of things or specific platforms, but we aren't here to tell you exactly what is going to be the solution for you, because there's no way for us to know that in our seats here. But we are here to help you make sure you're asking the right questions and thinking about the right things moving forward to make the right decisions. So that's really our goal here today. So things have really changed over the past few weeks and months. I found this slide from Lifeway. This is pre-COVID-19 numbers. In what format does your church regularly put any part of your worship service online? And if you go through those numbers, you see only 22% of respondents said that they live streamed the entire service. Only 10% live streamed just the sermon, which basically means prior to COVID-19, only 32% of churches, based on this study, were doing any sort of live streaming of their services. Compare that to this news headline, which states that 25,000 churches signed up for the Life Church Church Online streaming platform in light of COVID-19. That's a pretty big jump. Now, I don't have the percentages. I don't know that anybody's done the follow-up surveys yet to figure out how much that live streaming number has changed, but 25,000 is a pretty significant number. We'll see how that makes the percentages tick up. So I attend LCBC Church, even though I don't work there anymore. And I pulled a couple of slides here, just still images from both pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, as I'm going to now transition into talking about the video side of things. So this was just a couple of weeks prior to us locking everything down and starting to watch completely from home, no more physical location. And what I want you to note here is Matt, who's teaching this day, he knows who his primary audience is. And in this situation, prior to us all being at home, his primary audience was in front of him. And so he's not looking at me as the online viewer, he's looking at the physical audience in front of him. Compare that to just a couple of weeks later, where John, same position on stage, is now looking at me because he knows I'm the only person listening to him at this point, right? There's nobody in front of him to talk to anymore. There's nobody in the physical location. He's talking to the person online. And what I was really impressed with, and I had nothing to do with this, nobody even asked my opinion, so I'm just going to express it to you now. I want to just toot the LCBC folks' horn here a little bit. They pivoted because of this understanding of the audience had changed. And rather than continuing to do things the way they always did it, just for the online audience, they changed things up and moved the camera closer because they could, and had the speakers really address that online audience because that was the audience. And so this is a shot of the announcements and how that kind of changed, direct address to the camera. And then the message, they moved the speaking way out into the auditorium. It's directly addressed to the online audience. They're making direct eye contact, and it's much more intimate. The first weekend that this happened, I was watching online and watching the chat that was going on, and your average viewer, your average attendee noticed this, and they used that word that feels more intimate. And so, first of all, with a move to online, a move to live streaming, it's an understanding of this audience, right? We're not just talking to a physical audience in the room anymore. We're now talking to an audience that we can't see, that may be synchronous with us. They may be asynchronous, meaning they're going to be watching this later. But if our goal is for them to feel part of what's going on, it changes how we have to think about that audience and how we deliver that content. So in the room, we're talking about graphics on screens. We might be talking about IMAG. IMAG stands for image magnification. Let me stop sharing my screen so you can stop watching Jason and start watching me, although maybe you would have preferred to watch Jason. So in the room, IMAG, image magnification, means that what we're putting on the screen is larger than what we would see with our own eyes in the room. That's the point of IMAG, image magnification. However, online, our goal isn't necessarily image magnification. It is creating a window into the service for the folks at home. And so this might mean online, it would make more sense to have wider shots, to give them a sense of what's going on in the room, to give them a sense that there's actually somebody in the room that the person's speaking to once we have people back in our auditoriums and sanctuaries. We want to be able to give them that experience of that environment. So there's a difference there, and we have to be thinking through that difference between what's on screen in the room and what's on screen at home, on a phone, on a computer, on a TV. Online, we're really talking through the idea of broadcast. So if you're watching anything on television that's solely produced for television, they're going to show wide shots of the room. They're going to show the audience on any of those competition shows, America's Got Talent, anything like that. So online, you're thinking through that lens of giving people that full experience, even though they're not physically there. And so that has implications on our video equipment, specifically the switcher functionality. So a video switcher allows us to take multiple video sources, cameras, graphics computers, and kind of put those things together. And so what this means for us when we're thinking through broadcast and the room is we need to have the ability to do something different in the location versus online. So we want to think through multiple MEs. Those are like multi-effects layers, meaning I can output this camera on this output for the screen. I can output this camera for my broadcast audience. So it gets a little more complicated, but it's more flexible. The alternative is we just make the decision that in the room, we don't need cameras. If your room is small enough, it may be a matter of, for the room, it's graphics on our screens. And for online, that's the only place our cameras go. And that can simplify things. You can send your computer straight to the screens, and you're only worried about a video switcher that can handle your online audience. But those are some of the things that you need to think through when determining what your switcher needs to do. Also thinking through graphics for that online audience, for worship, for sermon notes. Do you really want to take over the whole screen for that online audience with graphics? Because at that point, they no longer have a window into your environment, that now all they're seeing are your graphics. So you might want to look at keying. So keying is the idea of being able to do lower thirds, so text on top of the cameras. So keying becomes a big issue. And there's different types of keying. It gets more complicated depending on what you have. The easiest thing to do is white text on a black background. That's pretty easy for many switchers to do, but it can get more complicated from there. Camera placement is the next thing I wanted to talk about briefly. As you can see in the examples that I showed, the closer that camera is, the more intimate it feels. It also helps just in terms of the equipment that you can afford or purchase. The farther away you are from the speaker, obviously, the more zoom that you need on that lens, that gets pricey. The more zoom you have, the sturdier your support needs to be. So you're going to spend more on tripods or pedestals or something like that in order to keep that camera steady the farther away you are. So the closer you can get that camera, the better you are. But of course, the trade-off is the closer you get that camera, the more likely it is going to be in front of somebody in your physical audience. So those are some things to think through and balance. Then thinking through your camera as well, manual versus auto. Auto obviously is easy, right? We just set everything to auto and the camera takes care of it. Autofocus, auto iris, auto everything. The problem with that is that cameras are dumb. Cameras are really dumb. I don't exactly know what's going on with what I'm about to show you, but I can guess. And so I'm just going to show this to you and guess what's going on. So this is a screenshot from a Facebook group, the CMG community on Facebook. Somebody posted this just the other day and it stuck out to me. And they wanted to know how to make their people brighter. And I don't exactly know what's going on. Maybe the lighting is just terribly dark. But if this camera is set to auto and those blue highlights on the back screen are what the camera is deciding is the brightest thing in the scene, the camera may just be deciding that it is exposing for those blue splotches as opposed to the skin tone, because again, cameras are dumb. And so we really have to be able to take over what the camera thinks is right and be able to actually tell the camera what is right. And so you really want to be thinking through manual camera controls. This is iris control, so exposure, focus, because it'll always focus on the wrong thing if you have it set to autofocus, and lens controls even. If you're thinking through a camera on a tripod, you don't want the camera operator to have to reach out here to the lens to focus or anything like that. And so you're probably looking at handle mounted camera controls as well in order to make that doable. So where do you invest your resources, your time, your money? Well, first of all, I would say invest in your volunteers, in training, in making sure that they have what they need to pull this off. And next, even though I'm the video guy, I'm going to say you're going to want to invest in audio and lighting before you invest in video, because lighting is the thing I just showed you, right? Lighting is what makes video look good. Tim's going to be speaking in a minute. I'm going to steal a line that I think he has on a t-shirt. Without light, it's radio. And so you want to make sure that, that the lighting is good. And Adam's going to be talking about audio for us. There's a quote that I pulled from Church Production Magazine. My friend Adam Schwint writes for them, and he said, studies have consistently shown that live streaming viewers are more apt to overlook substandard visuals than they are poor audio. And so audio is really important as well. And so with that in mind, I would like to move on to Adam Geesaman and give the floor to him. And if it will let me unmute him, there we go.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. First of all, I wanted to say I deleted my Facebook account, so it's not personal. I just don't have one anymore. So just in case, you know. So yeah, I'm going to share a little bit about audio, just some broad strokes here. I was going to share a little bit about, you know, how important audio was, but it seems better that someone else did that. It's a little less self-serving, I suppose. But just a couple points that I have in no particular order are, one of the things we think about is we need to get control of the audio mix. More likely than not, if you've tried to just take your audio that you have in your auditorium, which I'm assuming all of us have some level of amplification in the auditorium. If you've tried to take that and just stick it on a video and stream it to the internet, it probably does not sound the way that you would want it to sound. So being able to gain control of that mix so that you can make different adjustments to your audio mix that goes to online versus what you have in the room is a huge deal. There are a lot of different ways to do that. Some of them are easier than others. Some of them achieve maybe faster, better results. There's certainly large variation in pricing, but some of the ways would be, and probably what you think of when you see pictures of different churches and stuff, a lot of times people will split out to a broadcast console, which is certainly an easy way to do it. Like if you can get somebody on their own soundboard in a different room, the results are attainable pretty easy. However, that is expensive. You need more volunteers to do it, and often not practical if you're just starting up a live stream. And so some other ways to do it would be using like an auxiliary send off of your main front of house board. If you have the ability, you can, on a lot of digital boards, they have like tablet mixing applications right now. So you could, if you had another volunteer, you could hand them a tablet and they could do a little mix if they have some headphones or something. Another way, if you have a console that can do this, is people will group like instruments together. So you might have a drums group and a guitars group, and then a speaking group and a videos group. And then you can send those groups to their own output and kind of level things differently. The biggest thing that most people notice when they send just a front of house mix to an online is that the volume of the band is way louder than the volume of the person speaking on stage. And so even just getting enough control that you can turn the volume of the speaker up, person that presenting, the pastor, that would make a huge difference. People do not like sitting at home turning volume up and down while they're watching stuff. And oftentimes, if you don't do something like that, the band might even be fine in volume, but they can't turn the volume up loud enough to hear the pastor. And that's a big deal. I mean, that, so speaking of volume, the easiest, most general thing that you can do is make the mix as loud as you can without causing audible problems. If it's distorting or you're over compressing or something like that, that's a problem, but just get the volume up. Everybody's listening on different devices, whether it's a phone or a laptop or TVs, all that kind of stuff. So just having appropriate volume, it's real easy for people to turn something down that's too loud. It's less easy for people to turn something up if it's too quiet. There are special meters that you can get. Nowadays for broadcast, they measure in something called an LUFS or a LUF, but that's probably a more advanced thing. I wouldn't worry about it too much for now. Just turn it up as loud as you can. If you see red, turn it down a little bit. You know, that's kind of the big thing. When you're listening back, when you're monitoring to this, like, how do you know it sounds good, right? If all you can do is run off the front of house console, at least get yourself a decent set of headphones and just check and verify, yes, I have audio going to that output that I'm sending. I think I said this before, if you can get to another room, you know, get yourself a little pair of studio monitors or something, like isolating yourself from what's happening in the room so that you can really hear what's going on. That's even better. Another thing to keep in mind when you're monitoring, especially if you're in another room, is once you set a volume at what you're listening at on your playback monitors, do not turn the volume up and down, because that's your reference point. That's where you're mixing from. So if you have the volume set to a certain level and you mix all of your worship to that, and then you turn the speakers down or you turn them up or you do something, when you go to bring in different elements throughout the service, you don't know if they're at an appropriate volume with the thing that you just did. So leave your volume consistent in the room so that you can have a benchmark throughout the service. When you are referencing things, that's obviously about how to reference things live. I always will go back and listen afterwards. This is not a once and done thing for us. You know, we're going to do it every week. And so we want to continue to get better each time. And so go back and listen to your mix on a variety of different sources, you know, and a lot of times I'll take a recording of it and like play it back in my car, and that's good. But we also want to make sure that we're listening to it through the whole process of what's going on. So if your stream is going to Facebook, I want to listen to it after Facebook gets a hold of it and does whatever they're going to do in their processing. I want to make sure that it still sounds good after Facebook messes it up. You know, I want to make sure that it still sounds good after it goes through YouTube's thing. If I'm streaming to a campus and I'm going through some kind of hardware, something that we set up, I just want to make sure that I'm listening to the end result of what they're getting and not a recording of before, if that makes sense. So we always want to be referencing. If you really start listening to those references, you will notice, I promise you'll notice, you'll start making decisions about your mixes differently. You know, things that you thought you could hear really well in your headphones or on your studio monitors maybe don't show up on a phone or something like that. So that's a big deal. Another general thing, I'm not going to get into this too much, but watch out for copyrighted audio. If in your room you use Spotify for walk-in music. Do not stream that to Facebook. They will turn your stream off in a hurry. Ask me how I know. So just be careful with that. If you don't own it or you're unsure, it's better to just not do it. So make sure you have all the correct copyright stuff. And then the last thing is just be creative. Like don't be afraid to try things. A lot of times we'll try stuff during the week. We'll have rehearsals. We actually have a private Facebook group that we will stream stuff to throughout the week for our staff to watch if we need to. So like, try some stuff out before you get into a live situation. And then if it doesn't work, just remember how to put it back, right? The process that we go through as we're making these decisions is really important. And so try not to skip too many pieces. I know it's real tempting to just get online and be like, all right, here's, thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I should buy. And Ryan talked about this, but invest in knowledge first, invest in your volunteers, figure out what you need, figure out what you can't do with the equipment that you have, and then buy the gear that helps you do the thing you can't do. Don't just buy equipment and expect, oh, well, now I have all this equipment, my stream's going to be awesome, because it probably won't be awesome just from buying equipment. So make sure you're going through this process, take it a step at a time. Don't try and skip too many steps. Because that process is important. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we know what to buy next and how to invest our time and our resources, by figuring out what the problem is, fixing that problem, which then often reveals the next problem, which then we figure out, we fix, we move on. So, and I guess the last thing is, you will continue, if you don't already get other people's opinions about your mix, that will continue to happen online. Here's the thing. It's real easy to write off people's opinions if they say things in a way that's not technically correct. But the thing we have to keep in mind is that they're the end user, and their experience, whether they said the right thing or not, is still a very valid experience for them. And so it's our responsibility to receive that feedback and try and interpret what their problem actually is. Don't just say, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They probably don't know what they're talking about, but they still have a valid experience. And so if they're saying something like it doesn't sound good or it's whatever, really try and listen to what they're saying and try and learn something from it. Don't just write off stuff. You will serve them better in the long run by just really absorbing, listening, taking it in, but also, try and get feedback from people that you trust as well, that can give you well-articulated feedback, but you learn from both. So that's all I got.
Very good. Thank you, Adam. I like to tell the story about audio and streaming. I had another gentleman from a church in Allentown once tell me that people were telling him that when it got to the message, they couldn't hear the speaker, but only on iPhones, not on Android phones, which it made no sense whatsoever. It didn't make any sense until I started doing some mental gymnastics and figured out that what was happening was old iPhones only had a mono speaker. And so the stereo was out of phase. And when it got to the message and it was straight down the middle, it was the stereo was canceling itself out and they couldn't hear anything. But if you had an Android phone with stereo speakers, it was fine because you could hear the stereo. So, you may get some of those comments that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, but if you think some more about it, it might trigger something. So I've unmuted Tim Moser, who's going to talk to us about lighting now.
I heard a phrase like a couple weeks ago from a roundtable of lighting guys, and it has stuck with me, and I like to pass it on to you guys. It's like the best lighting equipment you can buy is what you already own. So you can get all these expensive lights and do all the different things, but it doesn't really matter. Use the lights that you have now. And one of the things I highly recommend is to get a light meter. What's great about a light meter is it gives you a benchmark on when you're doing lighting. Because people have different types of cameras, people have different type of lights, but this is the benchmark. So you can, what we usually run here is about 30-foot candles. And even though someone will say, oh, it's too bright, it's too dark, it's too this, the cameras love it. So I can just say, okay, my benchmark is 30-foot candles. If I go way above that or way below that, then I know the cameras are going to have issues. So get a, you know, and they're not expensive. You can probably get one for like about $80. But that is going to be your best piece of work. Train people how to use it. That way you can work on stuff, especially for the cameras, because everyone's got different cameras. Everyone's got different types of lighting. So what you saw those pictures from is when our speakers are only 8 feet away. The first light we used was from actually the studio department, or the audio department, excuse me, video department. We keep changing departments all the time. So they had it, and we had it in a location because no one was in the room. All bets are off. You could do whatever you want. That's why he was up in the one corner in the audience. Now that we're going to start introducing people, we're going to put them on stage, and we're not going to have this big light in the way anymore. So we're going to be using theatrical lights. Once again, I can just meter it and find out what looks best. So if you have at least 2 lights, that's what you want. A key light for the front that comes in the same direction as the camera, and one directly behind them. And then anything else is just icing on a cake. You can put lights behind them, make sure it's like a color wash behind them, fill in the dark spots as they, you know, as you look off in the dark distance. You maybe want to put lights up there just to see it. We do run with haze, so I'm able to use some automated lights and throw gobos and streak lights across behind the people who are talking. But it really comes down to make them look good. Also be careful, and we had this problem right off the bat, is I made the background look great, I made the foreground look great, and somewhere in the middle we lost it, and it looked like he was in front of a green screen. So the background is about 2 inches behind him, so you light it all the way back. So we have lights like now streaked directly behind him, and all the way all as back as far as we can go. So, and as for what kind of lights, I mean, you can just use an incandescent light from Home Depot, or even a clip-on light. You just want to make sure it's bright enough and that you can control it. LEDs are great and wonderful, but they have a dimming curve that doesn't always work, at least the cheap ones. There's really expensive LED lights, but they have a great dimmer curve. And what I mean by that is some of the cheap ones with a really bad dimmer curve, they start at 1%, they're off, 2%, they pop on. Ones with really decent dimmer curves will actually ramp up slowly, and those are the ones that you want. And if you can't afford those, stay with incandescent lights because it gives you a nice warm glow. And don't be afraid to experiment. If everyone's recording on the weekend, you have all week long to have someone just stand there and just practice different lighting on them, light meter, different colors, different backgrounds. We have a mannequin named Earl. He steps in for everyone, so I don't have to ask people to stand there. So yeah, I would just say you can't go wrong. Oh, sorry for the text there. But yeah, and then if you can haze the room, that adds a little bit to it. We've gotten so used to it that when we don't have haze, it looks really stark. But you also want to avoid not having giant clumpy clouds rolling across the stage. That's what you want to avoid. So get the room set a baseline of your haze, and then just maintain it. Yeah, as for, we've been doing IMAG for years, so going to the internet and doing the close-up shots was interesting change, but we had already established that we could do this. So you want to find out your shots. Also with your cameras, if you're doing cameras on worship, yes, we have lots of different moving lights. And yes, we can do lots of stuff called flash and trash. But the video director is in charge of the eye. So you can pull back on what you do as flash and trash or the real crazy stuff, you know, and then the video director is actually taking the person's eye and saying like, I want to show you this. I'm going to show you the guitarist. I'm going to show you the vocalist. And I'm going to show you the drummer. I'm going to show you the whole band. So work with the video director when you're doing lighting to find out what you're going to do, what colors you're going to use, who's the key people who are going to be talking or singing, who's not that important, drummers. So we always like try to put them in color in the background, and then we treat the drummers and sometimes the keyboardists as set pieces, you know, throw color on them. And let's see. But yeah, I'd say experiment, experiment, experiment. Try as much as the different ways you can do different things. And the cool thing is with the, if you have people in the audience, that's one thing. But when you don't have people in the room, that whole room becomes your playground. Put your speaker anywhere you want. You want to have, like I have lights that shoot into the, if the audience was in there, I'd be blinding all of them. But it looks good on camera because our cameramen are actually on the stage. So don't be afraid to try that. And you're going to have people say they don't like it. And that's where you have to trust your leadership to say what they're willing to accept. You know, they're willing to accept like this amount of volume. They're willing to accept this much lights in people's eyes. They're willing to accept certain things so that when people write in and everyone complains and everyone critiques, your leadership is who you need to listen to. So when they say, we like this, please continue down this track, I'm like, okay. They will field those questions when people don't like something. Now you want to make it good, you want to make it excellent, but sometimes people like different styles. So find a style that they want, do that, and then yeah, invest in a light meter. Start.
Thanks, Tim. A couple of things that came to mind as you were talking there. You were talking about LEDs and specifically cheap LEDs. One issue, of course, is the dimmer curve, but also flicker can be an issue with cheap LEDs, especially when you're talking about video, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You want to get decent LEDs simply because it keeps the flicker rate down. If you do an LED tape or some like the fun stuff, you can get LED tape, but what you want is the drivers you have to buy the expensive, decent drivers. You can get cheap tape, but as long as you get a decent driver, you'll be fine. And once again, experiment with it. It's not that expensive to just set up a demo. Here's LED tape. Here's a mediocre driver. Put a camera on it and watch it flicker on camera and then go like, well, that didn't work. The tape's good. The driver's bad.
Cool.
And then you just need a new driver. Standard LEDs, we have been lucky where we haven't come across the bad, truly LED fixture. But then again, I always try to get decent ones to begin with. So the companies like Elation or American DJ actually is starting to have some stuff that's actually decent. Chabet has some good stuff. And those are the low-end prices. I mean, if you're talking about Clay Packy and ETC and stuff, then you get the more expensive lights, but you don't really need them. And like that picture showed where the background is like that blue, just keep your background, lower percentages. Keep the front light on the person, the key, and let everything else just trail off in the lower percentages.
Great. Thank you, Tim. We're going to move on to Kevin. One thing that I've noticed, especially in teaching our students lighting and thinking about lighting for cameras, is the easiest thing to forget is the backlight. You know, it's easy to remember the front light because we expect that we have to light the front of the person in order to see them. But you also need to light the back of them so that there's separation between the subject and the background. And so that's the thing that's really easy to forget when you're first getting into lighting for cameras, is that backlight, because it's not intuitive. But you do need light hitting the back of the person as well. All right, let's move over into the streaming technology. Kevin, take it away.
All right, so we have, can you guys hear me, by the way? Yeah, cool, great. So we've talked about the video, the audio, and the lighting, and now we have everything kind of pieced together, right? So now how do we get it to your audience? How do we take it online? So there's a couple ways that you can consider doing this. You could stream it live to a platform, or you can offer it on your website or another platform to watch on demand. So you could archive that. So I love that Ryan showed the percentages too, because it kind of shows you how a couple different churches or how churches vary in that, whether they go live, whether they just offer their message or their sermon online to watch later on demand. You have to figure out what works best for you and figure out how to do that well. But either way, if you're going live or if you're going to have a file that you're going to put on demand, you have to be able to take a bigger video file and make it smaller. So to do that, you have to have something called an encoder, and an encoder really just compresses your audio and video feed down to a file that you can either send to a streaming platform, a CDN, or you can archive on demand. So encoders, they can come in a bunch of different varieties. You can have hardware encoders, and those can be, again, a bunch of different shapes and sizes. You have to really find one that works best with the equipment that you have. So if you're using specific switcher, or if it's SDI, if it's HDMI, you have to figure out which one is going to work best for you for that. So I can tell you some experiences that we've had with some hardware encoders at LCBC. So, and I'll give you just a little bit of backstory. We started going live onto Facebook when we first experimented with going live, and this was a couple years ago. I think we even started it on even an Easter service. We're like, okay, well, Easter, we want to go live onto Facebook. So we just did some research to try and figure out what was going to be the best option that was going to be a quality encoder, but wasn't going to break the bank price-wise. So we landed on using AJA's Hilo encoder, and that was brand new at the time. And it was really great. It allows you to take an SDI feed in. It allows you to stream your content to where you need to go, and it will give you a bunch of different things on its web GUI to be able to configure. So you can configure it to the platform that you need to go. So when you're thinking through encoders, you definitely have to also think about where you're sending it to. You have to be able to think, okay, if I'm going to Facebook or I'm going to YouTube or whatever you decide to use as your base or your platform to do that. And Adam will talk a little bit more about different options and platforms for that. But you're going to need to figure out what their recommended specs are going to be to send to there, because what an encoder does is we'll take that down to that specific bit rate or specific file type and format that it will use to send that online. So hardware encoders are nice because they're a little bit more robust. They're a piece of equipment. They're not just a software that's going to do that. And they, for me, I feel like they give you a little bit more of reliability, because you're having a piece of equipment handle all of the processing on that end to encode your video down. So, and then as for our example, then we moved towards using a CDN or a content delivery network, and just recently have been trying to figure out the best recommended encoder to use with them. So right now we're actually testing out a Wowzer Clearcaster encoder, and it's been working pretty well for that. But those are just two examples of a hardware encoder. You could also get some switchers that have built-in encoders into them. I think even the ATEM Mini Pro that just came out from Blackmagic has an encoder built into the switcher. So if you're looking for a switching equipment or a solution for that, you could look at finding one that has an encoder or some sort of way to put that where you need to go built into it. But then we also have software encoders. So I think one of the most popular software encoders is an open source software encoder, and it's called OBS, or I think it's Open Broadcast Software. And from there, what's available is you can use your computer basically as your processing power for that. So you're able to take in your video, and you can do a bunch of different things to your video, and that too, you could add things to, you can add stills, a bunch of different things. And you can then push it to the platform that you need to from there. The things that you'll need to know that for there is that you'll need to be able to figure out how to get your video into that. So you'll need to put some kind of adapter or have the available inputs for that computer to be able to take in your video feed. And you'll also need to make sure that your computer is robust enough to handle the encoding for that. But then there's also other options too. I think Telestream has a software called Wirecast that works pretty well, and Boxcast is another option for software encoders. And then even as recently, I don't know if any of you use ProPresenter, but ProPresenter 7 has been released, and they just released a new update to that probably last week, where it allows you to even push your content online from ProPresenter. So whether you put your video feeds into ProPresenter before you send it out to where you go, either to your projectors or to your other content, to your switcher, you can use that almost as a software-based switcher and software-based encoder all in one. So those are just other options. And really, you just want to do research on what's going to work best for your equipment that you have and the platform you're going to. So, and then just CDNs, or content delivery networks, they offer a different value for that. And that's not just streaming maybe to Facebook, or not just streaming to YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you're going. They can kind of take your one video stream and transcode it down to multiple different file types to send to multiple different platforms. So a CDN can be handy if you're trying to do multiple things at once as well. So I don't have much more to say on streaming technology. So
fair enough. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to tap you in a few minutes when we get into the question and answer. Some of those have been coming in. You guys, feel free to ask questions there in the chat. If we don't get to them now, we'll have a session or a portion of this here at the end where we can open the floor to questions, but use that chat area to ask any questions that you have. Okay, so let's bump over to Adam Hand now to talk us through the different platforms that we can use to deliver this content that's coming out of our encoders.
Yeah. So I feel like each piece along is just a piece of the puzzle here that we're figuring out. Before we jump into like specifics about platforms, I think it's good to talk a little bit about strategy and goals. And I even saw, I think, a question pop up in the chat already about, do we stream everything or just different parts of our service? And honestly, like some of you may not have had the opportunity to think about that. It might have been like, hey, we can't have church this weekend. How do we talk to our people? You know, and like that's the goal. Like, how can we just get something in front of people and like connect with them? So now that we're through probably that initial phase of just kind of figuring that out, and I'm sure all of you have figured out one way or another to connect with your people in different ways over the past 12 weeks now, maybe, depending on where you're at, or at least for us in Pennsylvania, I think it's been about 12 weeks. So it's probably good to revisit the strategy and the goals of what you're wanting to accomplish. And honestly, at least for us at LCBC, this conversation started, and Ryan was actually a part of this, like 6 or 7 years ago now, I think, maybe when we met with some of our leadership and we just started talking about streaming online and like, what if we did this, what do we want it to look like? And we found different models, like different churches in the country that were doing like truly like just on like online was like a campus, and like and that's how they wanted it, versus like another church where their online was literally like their front door to get them in. In our current context, pretty much for all churches, online has been the only way that we can meet. And that's just been our only option. So that's the strategy for it. But as you continue, it's good to think through like what your goals are for online. So like, do we want this to be its own campus or its own like ministry? Do we want to drive people to a location if they come online, or is it okay if they just stay online? Like, what's your church's kind of philosophy around that? So it's good to start to dive into that and dig into those questions, how people are engaging with you. But then some other questions to ask before you start picking a platform that are good, and just to ask and to start to get yourself familiar with. Do you want to provide like multiple options for how people can join? So do you want to send them to one place, or do you want to say, hey, you can go here, or you can go here, or you can go here, and you can watch us live online? So just kind of decide whether or not you want to have multiple options or just one place for them to go. And probably makes sense to start with one place, but that will be a question that comes up like, hey, why don't you put that here? Why can't I get that on this channel? And you'll want to know why you can't. It might be a technical thing, but it might be also a strategy thing too. Do you want to build your own solution? Like, do you want to try to do something on your own website, or do you want to lean into pre-made tools that are ready to go, or that you can pay to have it done and work, something like that? What type of community do you want to create online? Do you want to have more of a passive community where it's like they're there, but you're not interacting with them? Or do you want to have a community where like they can engage and maybe chat? Maybe like you're building like a Facebook group around just the church online people. There's a lot of different like scales of the type of community you would have, and that would also depict the platform that you'd probably go with. Another question, do you want to have moderators in a chat? That takes staff time or volunteers. It takes pre-planning how you want to respond to those questions that that are going to pop up. Like, why can't we be in the church? Or what do you guys believe about this? Or people just having conversations with one another that might get out of hand. So do you want to have moderators in a chat? Adam said this earlier, but do you want to play content that may be copyrighted, but you have permission to use? So maybe it's like a playlist and you have a streaming license to play that music, or maybe it's like a video piece that you have permission to use that's copyrighted. If you want to use that type of stuff, that limits some of your options because of Facebook and YouTube's automated algorithms that like to just shut that stuff down without asking questions. Another question to ask is this short-term, like a short-term bridge for our church just to get us through COVID and quarantine, or is this a longer-term solution or option that you're adding to your church or ministry? So it's probably good if you've been streaming over the past few weeks or doing something, it's probably good to start asking those questions so that when you get back into your buildings, it just doesn't like fall away and just forgotten when there's like a community of people there that are like looking for that every week. Does your stream need to be live? Can you use like a sim live option, like a simulated live, or just on-demand content? So like what kind that creates an experience when you do it live, like people are all kind of watching it together, but is that important to you? Like could it just be made available and people can go watch it whenever they want? And then finally, what content do you want to stream? This is kind of like the question that I don't know who it was, but someone asked earlier in the chat. Are you going to adjust your gathering based on the online audience? So I can tell you a little bit, like with LCBC, like our gatherings are a little bit shorter. As Ryan mentioned, we pivoted a little bit with placement, and like our speakers are like sitting in the room, and their cameras are much closer. So there's different things that we changed about how we did the production aspect of it, but will you change other aspects of it? Like we've seen some churches that they don't live stream the worship, but they like cut together almost like music videos. So they have like a pre-made announcement from an online host, then they have cut together music videos, and then the preaching portion is live. And then there's some churches that they'll just hit go, stream, and just stream whatever happens during the church service, and then they end it at the end. So there's a lot of different options there. So those are questions that would be worth asking, and they will help determine the platform that you want to go with. So, and then finally, and Kevin was kind of hinting to this stuff too a little bit, is like, do you have a streaming provider or not? If you don't, then there's certain platforms that are going to be better for you to use if you don't have a streaming provider. And I can list some streaming providers at the end. So here are like the 4 main options that we've seen used and that we've either tried out or thought about trying at some point. So the first one, like Kevin had mentioned, we actually started with Facebook Live, and we had an encoder. Facebook gives you like a stream key that you plug into that thing and some recommended settings, and then you hit record, and Facebook has some tools where you can go in and schedule it and add a title and do some things like that. But we started with Facebook Live, and it's a fairly easy setup. It's, for the most part, it's free. You got to have some type of encoder to send the stream to it. And Facebook even has some tools like, I can't remember the name of it, but there's that one camera that they have for kind of like influencers where it's like a 4K camera. You can zoom into different parts, and Mevo or something like that. So there's some tools that are more out of the box, like plug and play. But for the most part, it's a fairly easy setup. There's a lot of stuff online on how to do it, a lot of YouTube videos. And you don't need to be like an expert to do that. And it can be tied to like a current Facebook page that you already have. And so like if you already have like a following on Facebook or a group or something, you can tie the live stream to that. Another option would be YouTube. You can use YouTube Live. You'll need to have a YouTube account to do that. Again, that's free. But again, if you're like putting videos on YouTube already, it could be a natural place to do that. With both Facebook and YouTube, there's chats that you can have. I don't think you can turn the chat off on Facebook, but on YouTube, I know there's some different options for how you engage the chat there. Another cool thing that YouTube has, and we actually leveraged this about a week ago, we did like a senior celebration for all of our seniors graduating. We weren't going to stream something live. We actually recorded the service in multiple chunks throughout over a week, like the speaker at one time, the music at another time, some other videos that were sent in, and we put it all together, and we used YouTube Premiere to push out this video, because it does it in like a live-like setting where you upload it and you set a date for it to go live, and everyone can kind of watch it together and engage in a chat. But really it's an on-demand video. So you could use a tool even like that for if you didn't have a way to do on demand, and you're just literally like, all I have is an iPhone or some computer, and I can record myself and upload this later, and you can experience it together with that YouTube Premiere functionality. A third option for platform would be your website. So if you have like a WordPress site or anything that's like a content management type website where you can go in and like embed a video or a picture, depending on like, you could even use like Facebook or YouTube and stream to them and take that video and embed it on your website and point people to that video or to that page. You can even do that with a lot of the streaming providers. They provide a way for you to take the video, some little code that you copy and paste into a little editor, and then that creates the video window on your website. In most cases in that solution, you're not having a chat then, unless you build one on your site, and it'd be a very probably like basic solution, and you're just saying, hey, we just want people to go here, go to mychurch.com/live or live stream or church online, and here's our, that's where it'll show up at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings, and you can watch church that way. So it gives you maybe a little bit more control depending on how comfortable you are with like editing a page, with what that looks like, and it's kind of like more of your own experience. And then finally, the fourth big option is probably the Church Online platform, and that's currently what we use. And Church Online platform is a product that's made through Life Church out in Oklahoma, and through their Life Church Open network. So if you're familiar with that, they provide a lot of content, kids ministry stuff, adult ministry. Even during this time, during the quarantine, they were actually releasing worship videos that you could use for your church if you couldn't live stream your own like music. They took their branding off of it, and they're saying, hey, use our music videos for your worship service if this is the only way that you could do that. So what's cool with Church Online is it's free. It's built with churches in mind. Like its intent is for a church to use. There's a really cool community around how to use it, and they have specific tools that lean into things that you might do at a church, like announcements, or the chat and how you can moderate the chat and have conversations and live prayer. And then you can easily set up schedules that are recurring so that you don't really have to touch it on a week-to-week basis, but you can embed your video player in there. And then you show up at the right time on whenever your service is to engage with the chat. You can even turn the chat off if you don't want to have a chat on Church Online platform and engage that way. And they provide some helpful analytics and ways to measure engagement with that platform as well. So those are kind of the four big platforms, and we've kind of tested a little bit of all of them. For us right now, just for some context, we are just doing Church Online. We decided about a year ago to not do Facebook anymore. Part of that was we kept running into issues with copyrighted content. And for us, we wanted all of our community to be in one spot and for them to engage there with each other in the chat that way, and not to be so spread out. So, and then I think I just saw one other question in there too. Church Online doesn't have apps for smart TVs right now. Depending on like a provider that you might work with, they might have TV apps. So the particular provider that we use for actually streaming, that is like the backbone of the streaming service, they have app options that we are leaning into that we're using across, I think we have Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV. And then, I don't know if it's helpful, but like a couple streaming providers that you can actually use. Again, most of these you would probably need some type of encoder to do this with, but Vimeo actually has an option. So it can be like a place for on-demand content where you save your videos when they're done, but they also have a streaming option that you can use. Again, Facebook Live, we talked about that, YouTube Live. And then two companies that are used a lot in the church space, StreamMonkey is one of them, and Living as One they do a multi-site type broadcasting, but they also have an online streaming platform option. So they're all great options. We've used a handful of them at LCBC. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on platforms.
Great. Adam, I'm going to leave you up here, and I'm going to bring in Seth Barstow, who I didn't introduce yet, but Seth is the communication and IT director at Victory Church. He was previously in the IT department at Sight and Sound Theater as well, over there with Adam. Were you and Adam working at the same time over there?
We worked together for like a month.
A month, okay. Gotcha. Seth and I live in Lidditz, not together. He lives with his wife, Abby, and their 3 kids. And so I wanted to bring you in on this conversation because I know that the philosophy and goals are a little bit different between LCBC Church and Victory Church. And so just to give people a sense of what that looks like, Adam, you just kind of described it a little bit, but in a nutshell, what is the philosophy? What is the goal behind live streaming at LCBC Church outside of COVID-19? Because I know at first we didn't stream the whole service. We didn't archive the whole service, including the worship, and now we do. So what does that look like right now?
Yeah, so for us, and honestly, this has changed for us during COVID-19 too. We're kind of making a shift as a church. But what we're saying coming out of this is that we're actually going to be a digital first church that has locations. So we're going to recognize our Church Online community. I don't think we're going to scale back the number of services that gatherings that we currently offer. I think we're going to keep moving forward with them. And for us, we're going to recognize that we're starting to put together a team in place that's going to own Church Online, like almost just like a campus, like we would have. And we're still figuring out what that means for us. as an organization, like how we provide care best that way, and who follows up with people when there's prayer requests and things like that. But for us, from a strategy standpoint, we're going to keep leaning into this. Even after we open our buildings, this is going to be very much a way that we think that we can reach people in our state and even beyond Pennsylvania. But also that this is going to be probably the first experience that most or a lot of people will have with us as an organization. And if they choose to come to a physical location, we think that's great. Like at the end of the day, we think that meeting in person is the best expression of the church. But not everyone's comfortable with that right away. And some people, after a few weeks of online, they might want to do that. Others, it might take years. So because of that, we're kind of evaluating everything right now with how we do online. We're going to keep doing what we're doing right now. And we're just putting some more teams behind how we can provide care. I think our on-demand content and all that stuff is the same. I guess probably the biggest thing that we're trying to figure out is how do we measure success. So one thing I didn't really talk about, but we're like how we're counting like views, 30-minute watch times, and then even on-demand views like during the week from like Monday to Saturday, the week after, and then how we're like getting comfortable with what does an attendance look like online? Like what does engagement look like for someone that's online versus someone that's sitting in the auditorium in our building? So,
yeah. Seth, what is the online strategy, or what is the goal or philosophy for live streaming at Victory?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny listening to Adam talk. We definitely, similar to LCBC, we've been streaming for years on our website. We've been streaming to Facebook. During COVID, we just actually started doing YouTube as well. But, COVID-19, the common phrase, this is unprecedented circumstances. It's definitely caused us to just think and reevaluate. And for those of you who don't know, Victory is a church with 6 campuses. And we've been talking a lot over the next month that we need to change our language. And we're a church of 7 campuses because we've got that online campus. And at this point, it'd be really bad for us to go back because we've built that community with people that you probably won't ever see in Lancaster, but they love our church and they love the connection they feel and the community that they feel when they join us. And we can't just turn our shoulders once we're back into the building. So that's actually been like the biggest discussion over the last couple of weeks as we start to talk and evaluate what reentry looks like. How can we re-enter our buildings, but also continue to care for this online community that we've grown over the last 3 months without hiring anybody? So, and I'm sure you're all in that same boat. So it's just been a really fun conversation. And yeah, similar to what Adam said, we're just trying to figure out how to resource a team well, how to make sure that care point just stays up. Because yeah, you can't, once you start a stream, it's easier to give than to take away. So we've definitely learned that. And I mean that in the most positive way. Like we see that as such a value, and it'd just be such a bad place for us at this point to take it back.
Yeah. I'm gonna see how this goes. I'm gonna unmute our whole panel here, and then if you have any questions, hit us up in the chat, and we will try to hit it as a group here. One question that came in was, is there a financial measurement to a digital congregation? So in terms of giving, are you guys separating out what's coming through in terms of an online congregant as opposed to a congregant in one of your locations?
Yeah, I can answer that question. We, and this was pre-COVID actually that we started doing this, but we set up a we currently use PushPay for our giving platform. So, and I'm sure a lot of giving platforms can do this, but you can tokenize a link differently. So we have one that's tagged from Church Online. So we know that people are giving from there. And now that it's more of like an established thing, we actually have like, you can give to Church Online, like to any one of our campuses. So we did designate that. We don't necessarily, we haven't done it long enough to know like average gift per online person or anything like that versus someone in physical attendance. We've set some internal goals like, man, it'd be great if we got to this, or whatever it might be. So, but outside of that, that's what we've been doing.
Great. Kind of along the same lines, I saw early on just in the news that churches really took a hit in terms of giving during COVID-19 because of people not being physically there in order to give their tithe and that sort of thing. I know both, I'm assuming Victory has online giving set up or recurring giving. And me, I don't know if you're allowed to talk numbers here, but in terms of like percentage of giving, did you see that kind of recurring setup work well in terms of allowing giving to continue even though people weren't physically at your churches?
Yeah, I mean, I sit on the operations team in my role, and we've actually been really happy and blessed and surprised at this season. I mean, I think all churches are kind of in the same, like, we're blessed. We're doing a lot of planning. We do anticipate the fall being a little different. The stimulus, all the CARES Act stuff helped churches a lot, helped people a lot. And so we have that in consideration on why we haven't seen a dip yet. So like we don't necessarily think we're out of the water, home free yet, but we've been blessed so far and not seeing a big dip. And I think it is because we communicate our strategy well. We try to communicate our strategy well around giving and the importance of generosity, and we make it easy with push pay and giving options. So far we've been pretty happy, and yeah, again, blessed, super thankful for where we're at as a church right now.
Yeah. And okay.
Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we're kind of in the same boat. I think we kind of put like a freeze on everything as soon as we went into quarantine, and I think our senior pastor shared this publicly. Like, we were expecting like or we were planning for up to like a 50% cut, I think, in giving, and we were just trying to plan that way just in case. So we were like suspended all trips for the year, like no staff hires, all those type of things. And same scenario, like we tried to make some changes on our homepage to get the recurring giving or to give online more front and center. So it was kind of like, hey, if you want to move your giving online, click here. And we through the push pay setup, we kind of set up the page so that it would automated or went to the audit or the recurring giving. And we have seen an influx and people signing up with recurring gifts and people that have moved over to that. And we still made sure that we were able to accept like checks that were mailed in to us as well. But same thing that Victory has been seeing. It's been definitely been blessed, and it's been cool to see how people have continued to be generous through this through the quarantine.
And I know LCBC has been doing this too, but like we pivoted a little bit, and we've been really intentional at communicating why giving to the church matters. Like, instead of asking for money, we've been really intentional on capturing stories like, hey, your continual generosity enabled us to contribute to this food bank for the last 6 weeks that fed. Like, we really switched it to where we tell the story of why it's important to be generous. I think a lot of churches tend to panic, and this can be my first response too, is to like panic and be like, oh man, don't forget to keep giving, don't forget to keep giving. And we felt very burdened to like not fall into that trap of, we're not going to stress about our finances, we're not going to stress about making sure that people don't forget the tithe. We just want to have a gentle reminder of like, guys, when you give, this is what happens, and this is what we can support, and this is how we can better our community because of it. And I think that puts people at ease a little bit, because it doesn't feel like we're continually asking for money, even though we're in a not great season in our country. It just reminds people of what they're a part of and how they can continue to grow the kingdom. And it's really important in seasons like this.
That's great. Michael asked a question regarding cameras, and I know it's a little bit tricky to answer kind of specific questions about equipment, but can we help with sort of even if it's a brand, what is a good next step for a church that is maybe using iPhones right now what would be a good first step to get into in terms of cameras. I'll just say that based on my experience, especially if you're looking for lens controls, Panasonic has always been a little bit better with their lower end cameras having the ability to operate the focus, the zoom, and the iris from lens controls on the tripod if you're looking for a first step. From my experience, it's been harder to get that kind of functionality on some of the other manufacturers, but Adam, Kevin, you guys might have other suggestions.
I mean, Panasonics are great. There are other options too that you could look for. It's really just doing your research on that. Even Blackmagic even makes some cameras that are that can be a little bit more budget friendly, that do give you some good options, especially if you're already using equipment of theirs. It usually pairs together and works well together. So
yeah, we at the college have looked at Blackmagic as well. When you start getting into those lens controls, then you're looking at broadcast lenses and things like that. So it can, the camera itself ends up being fairly inexpensive, but then everything to make it work ends up making the price a lot bigger. But when we were talking about this, when we put this together, we talked about the fact that when you get into these sorts of questions, it's really good to get a partner to help you in the form of an integrator, so an AVL integrator, somebody who you can trust has been doing all of the homework themselves on what is the latest gear from all of the big manufacturers, what are the price points, give me your budget, tell me your goals, here's what I suggest. Those of us who are kind of down on the field in the trenches, we're not looking at those sales sheets every day. And so we can't really give you specifics on what the latest and greatest is for your price point. So really would suggest getting a partner for that kind of thing.
And if I could add one thing too, like thinking slightly more long-term, even as you start to buy cameras, maybe you can't afford the most expensive camera right now. One thing that's helped us is to come out with like a 5-year and a 10-year plan. Like, where do I want to go? And then back that out with how much money do I have now? Can I buy a piece of that can function in the meantime? You don't have to buy everything at once. But then that also can help when it comes to consistency. Specifically with cameras, like, if you buy a camera now and it's a Panasonic and then you buy like a Sony like a year later, they're going to look different. And so having a plan so that you can kind of stay in the same vein of thing, like, and the AV integrator, they should help you with all that. But making a plan and then trying to keep some form of consistency within a brand after you've made a decision will help the overall product of what you're doing.
Also, I would recommend demo everything. Because you can call like your integrator and say, hey, I want to demo this camera, and you can do side-by-side comparisons. Same thing with lights. I assume you can also do it with audio equipment, but to do side-by-side and say, okay, well, this is more cost-effective, but is it just as good as something that's really expensive? Okay, it's decent, and it's easier on the budget, so that's how you're going to find a lot of stuff. Don't be afraid to demo stuff.
Yeah. A couple other camera questions came in. Dave Gerhardt, who actually helped with the graphics for this, so thank you, Dave. He asked about DSLRs versus a dedicated video camera. I think for the type of work that we're talking about here, a video camera is going to give you greater control and flexibility. DSLRs look great when you have the time to make them look great, but you have to, when you need to change the exposure, it tends to be very steppy instead of smooth. The focus is, the depth of field is a lot more shallow, which looks great, but it makes focus all that more tricky. And unlike a video camera, you can't zoom in, focus, and have critical focus through the whole zoom range. DSLRs are great if you're doing film style production, not television style production, which is really what we're talking about here. Somebody asked about the Canon series. I love Canon. I love their color science. I think they look great. For me, in this situation, it comes down to how am I going to get the control that I need of the camera at the price point that I need it at. And so I want to be able to manually control everything from the tripod. I don't want to have to touch the camera every time I want to change something. Then recommendations for places to get media content. Any suggestions from the group here?
Life Church, their open network, they actually put a decent amount of stuff out there for free, similar to the worship videos I think Kevin mentioned. They also did a kids, they gave out their kids church for free. They always have a bunch of sermon series, and that's all free, part of the open network. Same as where you get the church online platform. They offer a lot of stuff.
Yep. CMG, Church Motion Graphics, is a fairly affordable option, and he sends out new packets or packages every few months. That would be one to look at as well. Question came in, how do you guys connect the camera to the switcher? Are you connected through HDMI, SDI, or wireless options?
We primarily use SDI, and we have experimented with Teradex wireless options for our handheld cameras in particular. We don't necessarily do HDMI unless we are putting something in particular that we need to get into the switcher that is an HDMI source, but even then we will use a converter to convert it from HDMI to HD SDI. So.
Yeah, SDI is going to be your more professional level connection. It locks. It's not going to accidentally get yanked out. If it breaks, you can actually re-terminate it, whereas an HDMI cable, I can tell you from experience, is very time consuming to re-terminate. If you can do it, SDI is the way to go in terms of connecting your equipment together there. Wireless is great. The more conversions you add to the signal flow, the greater chance, one, you're going to have a problem somewhere down the road because something's going to fail. And two, it tends to add latency, which isn't as big of a deal when you're talking about broadcast, but if you're doing any sort of IMAG where you're seeing the image in the room, latency or lag is really going to be noticeable. People can see 2 to 3 frames of latency. Once the video is 3 frames behind what it's supposed to be, people can see that with the naked eye. And some people can even see 1 to 2 frames of latency. So you want to be real careful with adding too many converters to the signal flow.
Well, and that goes back to the plan too, because that affects a lot more than just the camera. Like if you just start willy-nilly adding wireless elements to your sanctuary without a plan and coordination, it can affect audio, it can affect IT. Depending, you can affect some lighting things, not a lot, but some lighting things. So you really have to plan about what wireless elements you're going to add into your auditorium. You can't just, you don't want to just start piling them in without some coordination.
Yeah. Ray Fry, a former student, asked, moving forward post-COVID-19, how would you approach church leadership that is wary to stream because they're worried about in-person attendance?
So I guess, so Ray, this probably depends on where you're at and what state you're in and how the virus is impacted. My personal belief is I think in-person attendance is going to be slow. And I think I think for a lot of churches, it's going to, probably depending on the church and how big it is and like, you know, the demographic and everything, it's probably going to be like, there's going to be a new normal. So I think just acknowledging that is probably good at first. And then from there, I think probably the next step would be like, if you're the passionate one or whoever's like got kind of like that burden for church online and wants to understand like how live streaming works and know the community there, and just start having conversations, providing options and examples to leadership. A lot of times it's not like that we want to say no, or that leadership wants to say no to the idea, just like misunderstanding or lack of knowledge, and it's just something with everything else going on, they might not have time to dive into it. So I think if you can have those conversations, help answer those questions, like, hey, have other churches seen a decline in attendance when we've done live stream, and getting like real answers, you know, from those churches, and just start having that conversation. I know for us, it's been years of conversation that has gotten us to where we're at today. And I would even say that we made a lot of jumps that I don't think we would have made before pre-COVID, that we have at this point. So it's really, I think, just being honest, taking examples, being passionate about it, but also like engaging in a conversation well with them.
Yeah, and I actually saw on another Facebook group that I'm a part of, Church Communications Facebook group. Just yesterday, somebody posted, we're seeing churches in our area return with about 25% of their congregation. So that, to Adam's point, it's probably going to be slow to pick back up. And so I don't think live streaming is going away anytime soon, even as we open up. Any thoughts on reaching older congregants who are afraid of technology?
And I wish we would have done this, because I was really jealous when I saw it. But I saw Calvary Church in Lancaster. They actually had a small ministry. I don't know how many people were part of it, but in the beginning of this COVID season, they actually had a small ministry of people who reached out and called their older congregants and offered to walk them through downloading the app on their phone, getting it up on their computer. Like, it was like IT support for their older congregants. And when I saw that, I was like, man, we missed that boat. Like, kudos to Calvary, like, great thoughts. I kind of wish we would have done that at the top, because I think in the same post, I saw that they have experienced that, like, they didn't see a drop in attendance online because of that. And they were anticipating a drop online because they were worried their older attendance would kind of drop. My great grandmother watches Calvary, and she said she got one of those calls, and it's what made her watch Calvary. So kudos to Calvary Church in Lancaster for figuring it out. But I thought that was a pretty cool opportunity for them. Great.
This has been a great conversation, guys. I don't want to take up any more of your time or those who have joined us here. I do want to just point out that I think this is part of what makes this community work, is this mentorship that happens. Even in my time as the video production director at LCBC, I could reach out to Life Church and ask them copyright questions and things like that. And so I think there is a culture of mentorship and help in the community, in the church community, especially in the tech and communication side of things. So I won't speak for all of these guys, but I'll at least speak for myself, that if you have questions, we may not have all the answers, but we might be able to help you point you to the right direction, or help you ask the right questions moving forward. Again, appreciate everybody's time. Let me pray for all of you as you move forward and make decisions in these areas. God, thanks for the time that you gave us today to talk together. Thanks for the way that you are moving in the ministries of each of these folks that have joined us today. God, as we continue to navigate this new reality, I pray that you would be in all of our conversations and all of our decisions, and give us wisdom and discernment. Help us to focus on the right things, to leave go of those things that will not help move your mission forward in each of our churches and ministries. And I pray that the individuals that need to be connected to our churches and through our churches that need to be connected to you would find us through these outlets that have become possible only because of what has happened over the past 3 months. And so I pray that this is one of those unexpected benefits to what we've been going through. Nobody would have asked for it, but I pray that good will come from it, and that you will continue to bless the efforts of each of these individuals. In your name I pray, amen. Thanks everyone, appreciate your time. If you have any questions, reach out. Thanks.